Marilyn Hemingway, and welcome to A Gathering Place. I said, I'm stepping back because we have young voices who want to be heard and they're moving on something.
Branding is really important to you and your business.
Even a basic type of technology, you learn it all.
And people are
Good question. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to A Gathering Place, brought to you by the Gullah Geechee Chamber of Commerce and hosted by me, Marilyn Hemingway. And today is our third Sunday Politics Talk, where I get together with some very good friends, Jamarr Brown and Brandon Upson, and we talk politics and what's going on in the world of politics. And as usual, in the good old USA, we've got a lot to talk about. So let me go ahead and bring in my co-hosts, because they're my co-hosts, and sometimes we'll bring in special guests, but we'll bring in Mr. Jamarr Brown.
Hey, Marilyn.
Hey, Jamarr, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing great, thank
Good.
you. And also, let's pop in with Mr. Brandon Upson. Hey, Brandon.
Hey, y'all. How y'all doing?
We're all doing good, y'all. We were in behind the scenes before we started the show. We were talking about Brandon and his beautiful natural lighting. He is just glowing today. So it looks like he's obviously enjoying the beautiful weather we're having here in South Carolina. Let me remind everyone: drop your questions, comments, because we love your comments in the comment section. Especially if you're watching on Facebook, and we'll try to get to all the questions, comments that we receive. But we have a lot to talk about, Brandon and Jamarr. And before we get started, y'all, I do a countdown. I do the show opening. And Brandon and Jamarr, I think you guys can see me. Can you see me when that's happening? Yeah. And I disappeared because I was looking for a book I picked up this week called Mediocre. The myth of white male supremacy, I believe, is the subtitle. And it talks about the history. It's written by a sister who lives in Seattle, Washington, but she really gets into the white male supremacy myth and how it impacts everyone. And it also impacts the subjects that we're going to talk about today, y'all. We talked about these subjects that we wanted to make sure we covered today. But I hopped up to go find the book, but I think I left it in my car. But but I recommend that you get that book. And, I try to read and get as much knowledge as possible. But some of these books, y'all, I have to take my time reading because I get angry. It really, yeah, I get angry. But I hope it's a righteous anger that I do channel in productive action. And that's the difference. We don't want to get angry so that it eats us up, because then that becomes a mental health issue. And we don't want to get angry where we get violent. All right. But this book talks about the white male supremacy myth and how America was built on it. And I think some of the topics, or actually all of the topics we're going to talk about today, are impacted from that original myth of which America was founded on, that, that manifest destiny, that the white male is superior. And all our institutions or systems are built around uplifting that myth, continuing that myth, and whether we realize it or not, we all play a part in upholding that myth. So you have to be very conscious, and whether you're anti-racist, anti-sexist, just that you need to realize that we all have to consciously work to change those systems and institutions so that we all have equality and equity. And I just wanted to put that out there, and I do recommend that folks read that book. It's called Mediocre. And just happened to see it in Barnes & Noble, and I said, hey, I'm going to pick it up and start reading it, and I did so, along with about 3 other books that I picked up. But anyway, we wanted to talk about some subjects, and Brandon, we'll start with you with the subject that you wanted to get into, and go ahead and remind me what it is. I'm going to tell you right now.
But let me tell you, these last three Sundays that we've spoken, you've made me buy a new book. So I might get that one as
Yeah, we're
soon
gonna have to
as I
get one.
can. So I wanted to talk about the attack on the working poor that we've seen over this last 2 weeks. We know it's been going on longer, but they've consolidated around talking points that, you know, um, folks who are on assistance with unemployment benefits are lazy and don't want to get back to work because they're making more money sitting at home on their butts than they were at their jobs. And I think they answer the question for us, right? How in the world am I making more money off of this assistance than I would be at work, right? And in many cases, when you boil it down, these folks are making. I know here in South Carolina, it's around $14 an hour if you would equate the money that they're getting to what the 80-hour, or I'm sorry, 40-hour work week is what they're getting in benefits. So you mean to tell me it's that many people out here making less than $14 an hour? I want to know how many are making $7 minimum wage. I think it's 7.25, and how many folks were working and making two something an hour as waiters and waitresses in these restaurants where their tips have been impacted, but their wages have not been increased. So yeah, I wanted to talk about that.
Yeah, because I did write a piece about it, and I'm going to go find that piece. But some of what I wrote in this piece is nothing new. I think what the pandemic did is that it gave people time to rest,
Mhm.
and it gave them time. When you're resting, you tend to have a time to read and get knowledge, or watch TV, or talk to other folks about deeper subjects that you usually don't have time for. And what ends up happening, people start to realize, well, hey, I feel better. I'm breathing better. I'm not as tired. And, I need to make some more money. I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah.
That
It
mental
was,
clarity leads to a new form of freedom. you know, like we when we're working on these jobs full time just to make enough to be dependent on that next paycheck because it's not enough money to make us to the end of the month, and some of us have to go out and find second and third jobs and side hustles. You get burnt out and you don't have the time or the mental clarity to figure your way through this mess, right? And that pandemic being home for that amount of time, I say it gave us time to say, oh, wait, this is my escape plan. I can formulate it so that I can actually live the freedom that I desire.
that's right. And that's the silver lining in the pandemic. And there was a silver lining, and maybe more than one, is it gave us time. Pandemic gave us time that we didn't have before. And I think this the result of it is people are fed up with being paid a minimum wage that's not, it's not providing for them and their families. It's not providing the basics of food, clothing, and shelter. And,
Right.
and people are just tired of it, and they shouldn't. And I am on the side, even though I started Gotta Get Your Chamber of Commerce. I am on the side of working people, because in the Black community, we work so hard, as you say, Brandon, we get burnout. We can't start businesses. Businesses lead to economic independences. Businesses lead to economic uplift. And this is part of the systems and institutions that are planned to keep us working 2, 3, 4 jobs, to keep us having to pay child care. We could even get into infrastructure, because the new infrastructure bill includes child care. It
Amen.
is
Mm-hmm.
an infrastructure. We're working to survive rather than working to thrive. And a lot of people have woke up to that fact that I'm not gonna go work in this restaurant for minimum wage, and I'm being yelled at
Hmm.
not only by the owner, I'm being yelled at by people who refuse to wear a mask, who refuse to get vaccinated, and think I need to cater to their needs. No, not their needs, to their wants. Because when you go to a restaurant to eat, that's not a need, that's a want. The need is you cooking at home. The want is you going out to a restaurant and somebody else cooking for you. You know?
Right.
So, Jamarr, you got any thoughts regarding this subject?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think one of the things I think that is especially dangerous that many governors have done, especially I know Henry McMaster, other
Mm,
folks have done, is really pull back from the unemployment assistance that came. And so I think most of us know that in many of the stimulus packages that there was additional assistance for those who were unemployed, both before and during the pandemic. And what we're seeing now is I'm just going to say it, the Southern Republican governors, pulling back on their connection with the federal government, that is really going to hurt a lot of families as well, because people really needed not just the money, but somewhat, like you said, Brandon, the mental security to know that they can pay their bills or feed their children, etc. And we have to remember that in the midst of a pandemic, parents were being workers, business owners, counselors, tutors, teachers, right? And so not only is it your job that you are working virtually, now you're not only taking care of your children full time, but you're also catering to their needs as well, especially their academic and their educational needs. And so making sure that families had enough resources to be able to support themselves in that work, I think is important. But what I think we have to also acknowledge is part of the pandemic, we realized that it exposed actually the systemic inequities that have existed for decades. One of the things is, there's always this saying about pull yourself by the bootstraps. Well, you can't pull yourself by the bootstraps if somebody's standing on the boot. And I think the pandemic has shown us that, it's shown us that the boots have been stood on. And that's why people are working 2 and 3 jobs. That's why people are cutting here and cutting here. People are trying to decide, do I pay my rent or do I get my medicine? Do I go grocery shopping? Do I pay my light bill? Whatever the case may be, for different circumstances. And so I think that this infrastructure bill that's coming will be beneficial. But I also think that the stimulus bill that just passed a couple months ago, if this had happened 6-9 months ago, imagine where we would be.
Mm-hmm.
The last thing I'll say, and I'll pass it to you, Brandon, is it is time for us to be more focused and proactive on policies. And a lot of this is going to have to happen at the federal level. What we're seeing also is a disconnect with economic and political power for working class people, right? Making sure that they're able to start their businesses, they're able to make decent wages, they're able to support themselves and their families. But then now what we're also seeing, and we're seeing it in Texas and Georgia and all over, we're seeing, like, for example, voting rights being rolled back, right? Because at the end of the day, the very people who are making us decide between paying the prescription or paying for groceries are the very people who are also navigating the system to make sure they maintain power, which further spreads the systemic and economic inequities that we have faced for not just decades, honestly, centuries. I mean, we really want to tell the truth. And so this has gone on for hundreds of years. And so I think those are some of the things that we're starting to see. And this unemployment piece, this attack on workers piece, that Brandon is talking about, I think is a representative of what they've been doing for centuries. And now it's our responsibility to start thinking about how do we better educate people about the stimulus package? What money is in there? How they actually access the money? How do they actually apply? And how do we get more organizations, like Maryland's been doing a great job with the Gullah Geechee Chain, but how do we get more community organizations to get educated so that they can get in the community and really be educating people on, this is how you get a grant. This is how you get a PPP loan. This is how you do this. And we've got to start gearing and directing our people toward those resources in a meaningful way. And so a lot of this work that we have to do right now isn't just call your representative or show up to a meeting. This is about saying, how do we work with organizations or hold organizations accountable or elected officials accountable to ensuring that the community has the tangible information they need to improve their lives, improve their homes and their businesses.
I'm so glad you said that, Jamarr. Go ahead, Brandon, and speak to that.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with everything that Jamarr just said. Just adding to it, I see what Erica made some comments in the comment section. And here's the thing, that information and education is so important. My wife was brought something to me the other day. She was like, yeah, I learned this on TikTok. I was like, so now TikTok is a place where we get amazing information. But when I went on there, I got glued to it for at least an hour. But I felt like it was productive because I was finding stuff that I was interested in, and it was quality information, right? We have to take advantage of every opportunity and medium that we can to, yes, to educate to educate our community. Like, education is the key to unlocking the door to power. And the reason why we see these constant and unwavering attacks on poor people, marginalized people, our poor and vulnerable communities is because there is a group of people who want to maintain power over them. And they feel like if this group gains any type of knowledge, start moving in a progressive direction, that is going to take away from my power over them and my power to control this space, right? And when we're talking about rebuilding power in marginalized communities, it looks like in some cases taking away others' power to control our lives without our intent, approval, right? And when Governor McMaster said, I'm going to end these benefits for South Carolinians because too many of them are sitting at home making more money than when they were at work. The power that we have, and I know this is a nonpartisan show, but his tail got to get up out of there. And I know there's a lot of work that goes into doing that, but we need to make sure that we are electing people who care about us and understand our needs. He's so detached from our reality that there's no way in the world that he would ever be able to address the issues that we face as not just Black folks in South Carolina, but poor folks in South Carolina. And that the biggest myth, and I know we're going to talk about the big lie, with Donald Trump and the January 6th insurrection. But I want to talk about the big myth where our white brothers and sisters who live on those backwoods dirt roads in a trailer, who don't have a pot to pee in or a window to throw it out in, and think that these Republicans are fighting for them and their well-being when they're actually not. They're using you. They could care less about you and your well-being other than having you go push the button for them in the voting booth or go out here and act a daggone fool on the front steps of the U.S. Capitol. We have to educate not just people who look like us, but folks who have bought into that myth, fed into the lie, and drank the Kool-Aid, and hopefully they will see some semblance of light.
I think ultimately, Brandon, and I'll say this quickly, Jamar, the biggest myth is going back then to whiteness. They have convinced these folks who don't have the pot to piss in or the window to throw it out of that it's their whiteness that gives them value. And that's why they keep voting for these folks, while these folks run laughing to the bank every time. And we usually hear that saying that says the plantation mentality. Let's be honest, most of the time when Black people are talking about that, they're talking about the field slave and the house slave kind of mentality. But there's a plantation mentality that impacts all of us. And Henry McMaster is the epitome of a plantation owner mentality. How dare these folks get out of line? How dare they demand that they get paid? That's a plantation mentality right there. And we've all been brainwashed into buying into that. And it takes work. It takes gathering knowledge to break free of that mentality. When I say knowledge, expose yourself to other cultures, expose yourself to other ethnicities, and see what other people are doing out here. Because it really is going to ultimately be about people of color working together that benefits everybody. So the biggest myth is the lie of white male supremacy. Go ahead, Jamarr.
Yeah, well, I mean, you took the words right out of my mouth. It's not just white male supremacy, but it's white, it's not just white privilege, superiority, and all of those different things. But one of the things I think that, is important, in the midst of all this is that we have to make sure that we are giving people the tools to not be the willing plantation residents. And I think that is what's happening to that plantation mentality. And one of the things that I have always said is that people of color have to come together in order not just to combat the system of white supremacy, but also when, especially Black people do well, but when people of color do well, everyone else does well too. And we're going to only move forward when we begin to center the very people, not only that are impacted, but that are also, have the talent and the resources and the knowledge to move forward. Also, the thing I would also challenge people to do is challenge other industries. So not just ethnicities and other things, but also making sure that you understand different industries. Because what happens is when Black and brown people get well at one industry, they go and start another one. And then we recycle the same plantation mentality. So that's what happened, right? Is agriculture. Then there were more Black farmers. Then they moved to manufacturing. There were more Black manufacturers. Now they're moving to tech. Black people moving to tech. Now they're moving to clean energy. I mean, it's just, they move industries as Black and brown people have also, advanced or gotten themselves educated, et cetera, in the midst of that. I think that's something that's important. And then the last piece that I'll share, to Brandon's point, especially around voting people out, we've got to start challenging people to vote for something and not just against something. What we saw was what happens when you're just against something. January 6th is what happens. You're just against the election results of Black and brown people voting. That's what they were there to be against. Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley of Massachusetts says this best, and I love it, is that policy is my love language. And as Black and brown people, we've got to start demanding policy. It's not just about here's the money, here's the tools. It's about here's the policy. Because you can throw, as we've seen over decades, you can throw money at a problem. We can pass bills that are millions and billions and trillions of dollars. But if there's not the policy that changes the system when the money is invested in communities across the country, then we're repeating the cycle and repeating the pattern. And so I think that those are things that we have to start looking toward and being very critical about, is because ultimately, at the end of the day, right, to Brandon's point, when we're talking about assistance for those who may be unemployed or voting rights or any issue, that what is the proactive policy that people who are not like Henry McMaster, what are they putting forward that will give people a reason to come to the polls? Because we've said for people like Henry McMaster or Greg Abbott here in Texas or Brian Kemp, you can name the governors. We've said they've done this, and that, and people still vote for them because there has to be an alternative that is proactive and that is centered in people. So that people not only see themselves in the political process, but they see themselves in the policy. And so we've got to get back to the point of issues and policy being our love language. And that I've been saying it since the day of the Joe Biden was declared the winner, is Black and brown people, we're no longer going to continue engaging in this process where there is no return on our investment. And it's not just about a bill. It's also about resources, education, knowledge, everything else that we discussed. And so we're standing and we're demanding a return on our investment, and that return should be policy.
So Jamarr, I'm sitting at home listening to this show, and I'm hearing that we need to know more about policy. That's good. But once I decide, hey, I'm going to get some knowledge and know more about policy, what do I do? Regular Johnetta Q. Public and Joe Q. Public sitting at home. What do I do?
Oh, there's
what
lots of things.
Do I take?
There are lots of things that you can do. You want me to give the list?
Give three today. Give three
I'll
today.
do three. We've said on this show, I think you've said on multiple shows, is number one, we've got to start showing up to our legislatures and our school board meetings, our city council meetings, not necessarily just because you're for or against something, but this is where they have prime discussion about where policy is. And usually a lot of times what we also don't tell people about attending is also to make public comment. And part of public comment is that where you should be asking questions to the not just elected officials, because we have to start looking at our elected officials as decision makers. Whatever it is that we want, these are the people, right, that are on this council, that are on this school board, whatever. These are the people that are making a decision that can give me what I want. And that's what we have to start looking at. And so we can't just say, you need to do your job. We need to tell them what their job is. And that's our role. And we have to be more clear in our testimony, more clear in how we ask and answer questions in the midst of these meetings to make sure that our elected officials and our decision makers are very clear about what the community wants, needs, and is what they're asking for. That's number one. Number two, I think one of the things that is very important as part of our policy work is also making sure that we are looking to the point of advocacy organizations. There are a lot of organizations that work on different issues. So I was the former state director for Planned Parenthood's advocacy arm for 5 years in Texas, working on healthcare, reproductive and sexual health issues. There are organizations that work on voting rights or that public education, environmental justice, you name whatever issue, there is an organization that does that work. And so I tell people all the time to get involved with those organizations because a lot of them have organizing and advocacy arms. And at least in my line of work, we had what we call a ladder of engagement. And what a ladder of engagement for us was different actions that you can tangibly take, whether that's signing petitions, whether that's writing op-eds so that you can educate your community about your opinions and of decisions that are happening. They show up to the Capitol sometimes. I know it's a little different with COVID and folks are still, navigating with masks and vaccines and things. But a lot of these organizations already do that work. And I tell people to join these organizations. A lot of them are free. You can just send your email, your name, email, your zip code, and you can be a part of it. You don't even have to pay anything. But we have lobby days. We have phone banks. They endorse candidates. And it's a good way to really build yourself some support. Because one of the things that I hear all the time about politics and advocacy is it's hard to get started. Or what am I supposed to do? And, I don't want to be alone. I don't want to be by myself. And so these are great groups where you can go meet people who probably think similar to you about different issues in communities across the state and across the country. And so it's also a very good networking opportunity and relationship building opportunity because that's going to be fundamentally important. And then lastly, the thing that I will say also as well is two things. One is not just vote, but vote for something and for somebody, because I think Eric or someone that we're always going to stop something and we're not going to do something. And I think in this season of our lives, we're only going to bring people along when we're doing something. We saw that in Georgia and Arizona and different states across the country. The other piece is making sure that we're donating to these different organizations. There are a lot of work that's happening, but one of the things that sometimes when we're talking about power building in our communities is sometimes the organizations that are trying to organize in the communities don't have the resources to spread their reach, to expand their reach in order to do that work. And so I do my $10, $20 recurring donations to some organizations that I really care about, not because I'm going to go to the phone bank, but because maybe there's somebody else who wants to have an opportunity to work with an organization. That organization has the opportunity and the money to reach them in a meaningful way. And so those are some of the things I think that, in addition to everything else that's been said, we talk about voting, we talked about educating yourself, building relationships with other industries and other ethnicities. But, really a lot of it is, to your point, Marilyn, we always have our little book club. But it is, I tell people sometimes start yourself a book club or some kind of group, where you meet and talk about issues and, different things that you can do in your respective communities. But I think that what people are realizing now is that we've got to show up because the other side of the issue, they're going to show up.
They sure are.
And elected officials they look at the numbers. They look at who shows up and who doesn't. And a lot of times that influences votes on particular bills and particular policies as well.
And can I add something real quick?
Please do.
Part of where we start is just start to have the conversation. Like, you will be surprised what knowledge base the people around you have that's actual credible. Like I was at the barbershop in North Augusta getting Patrick's haircut, and we start talking about some policy stuff, right? Because the job that I'm doing with the South Carolina State House, and the conversation I had with folks at the barbershop turned into stuff that I literally took to the representatives the next week. Like, just start having the conversation about, what you like or what you dislike and involve people in that. And last thing to something that Jamarr said earlier, my mom got pissed off about something, and she Googled the name of every person who represents her, from her city council member county council, her state representative, state senator, congressional member, and both U.S. Senate members here in South Carolina know Melissa Lee's name now because she gave all of them the smoke. And she's like, I'm not sure which one of y'all can do something about it, but somebody is. And literally, she got traction on the issue that she was facing because she just hit everybody. So at the very least, just do a quick Google search and figure out who represents you and make sure that you talk to them too.
I'm glad you said that, Brandon, because I just finished a push to sell Santee Cooper, the Gullah Geechee Chamber of Commerce, and it didn't work out. They voted for reform, but we'll see what happens in the long run. But it was an effort that really kind of was mostly focused in the Low Country, but also impacted statewide. And sometimes I wanted to mention this because sometimes you may lose the battle, but win the war. And it's not about what happens right now. It's also what you're building, those relationships that you're building, the notice that you're gaining will lead to the bigger and longer win. So we're saying what you need to do, get the knowledge, get involved, contact your elected officials. But I also want people to realize you need to make a decision to be in this for the long run. Because we're talking generational impact. Sometimes you're not going to see the impact right now. You're going to see it down the road. But we need you guys to stay in it. And I say guys, that's guys and girls. I should say that. I need everyone to stay in the fight.
Yeah,
stay
absolutely.
In the fight because you're going to get frustrated. It is very frustrating sometimes, but then there are also times when you are going to have that win. And either one, you need to stay in it in the long term. Mm-hmm. So we want also to talk about. Go ahead, Jamarr.
Let me add one thing, and then we can move on, because I want to give people a resource. There are two things that they can look at, because to Brandon's mom's story about talking to everybody, because the things people don't realize is elected officials, they talk to each other, right? Whatever level they serve in. A lot of times that state reps can call city council members or vice versa, and so sometimes it is best to have multiple elected officials also as well. Secondly, folks can use their two websites. One is votesmart.org, and I think the other one is targetsmart.org. And what you can do is put your zip code in. So you can put your address and your zip code in, and then it will populate all of your elected officials and candidates if you are in current elections. So you'll be able to see, from your Congress member to your state house member, et cetera, who those people are, how to get in touch with them, their phone number, their address, if you send it in mail, their email, et cetera. They have that for the whole country. So you should be able to use that. And then in elections, then you'll see the candidates if you have a current election going on. And so I wanted just to make sure that we shared resources too, for people to use, not just tell them what to do, but here's a resource that you can use. And so make sure that you're doing that. I think someone dropped in the chat about the South Carolina State House if you're contacting your state representative. And I think that those things are very important for people to know.
Thank you, Jamarr. I'm glad you mentioned that because, when we first started this third Sunday politics, and I brought you guys on to talk about politics, and we agreed to keep doing this every third Sunday. This too is a resource. We knew this would be a resource just talking to folks because we started out just like the way we're talking, started reading, meeting with other folks, going to meetings, groups, and we got more involved. So we have a few years of experience under our belt, but you got to start someplace. And I want people to view this show every third Sunday, come back, because we're going to be talking about different political topics. I should say different topics, because politics is in everything. And we're going to try to give you resources. We are resources also. So reach out to us. At the bottom of the screen, I have the website addresses for Jamarr's organization and Brandon's organization. And I say their organization because they really run those organizations, at least in my opinion. Brandon's going to have to hop off in a few minutes, but Brandon, before you go, let's make sure we hit all the topics that you wanted to talk about. Did we get all your topics in? Anything you want to add about what's going on with COVID, the big lie, and I know because Jamarr wanted to talk about those too, and of course, what happened with Representative Cheney this week?
Yeah, so I want to talk about the big lie. One of the things is when someone tells you, believe what I say, not your lying eyes. You know, at some point we have to hold ourselves accountable. Like we all saw what happened. We weren't living under a rock. You know, there's not enough political spin in this world to combat our own common sense. And it is a trying to get my words together because I don't want to chastise anybody, but we just have to use our own discernment and our common sense in this, and don't let anyone talk us out of using either of them. That whole thing on the 6th was the result of people lending over their entire bodies for the sake of someone else, and just putting a mute button on their own common sense. And we cannot allow that to happen again, whether it's for a Republican or a Democrat. We have to hold ourselves accountable. We can't allow that to ever happen again at any level.
I agree, Brandon. I think people also need to realize, for us not to let this happen again, that it's not just the lie of January 6th. It's 4 years of Trump. It's 50 years of a Republican Party that has been pushing back on civil rights, on women's rights. It's let's go all the way back to 1619. And if you live in Georgetown, South Carolina, it's actually 1526 that it's been a lie day after day. And one thing that came up is America is not a racist country. I believe that's Senator Tim Scott. I'm paraphrasing him. Well, America is a racist country. I'm saying it. And if it wasn't, we would not have had January 6th. What Tim Scott said was not said for the country. It was to give comfort to those who want to continue the lie that January 6th did not happen, that it was merely a normal tourism day at the U.S. Capitol. But we saw it for ourselves, Brandon, as you said, we saw it. And that's what makes me disturbed about this, that without any hesitation during the hearing, that these white Republican males point blank lied and expect the country to believe it. I mean, that's the irksome.
Well, I think above the election, I'm gonna jump in on this one because
Go ahead, Jamarr.
I think one of the things that we don't acknowledge, well, some of us do, some of us don't, acknowledge is racism not existing in the country has been the big lie. And that's what we don't talk about, right? And how it shows up in our jobs, how it shows up in our communities, how it shows up in healthcare, how it shows up in education, in the courtroom. I mean, we can go on. And how racism has shown up in even before 1526, right? And how that's shown up across the world. And so what we did not do in the 1500s is what showed up January 6th.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the thing that we've got to talk about. The big lie of the country is not the election being stolen. The big lie is that people continue to tell this country that it's not racist and that there's not racism in the country. The January 6th is just a representation of the racism that existed because Republicans have lost elections before. This isn't the first presidential election they lost. This is the first presidential election they lost to Black and brown people. Mm-hmm. That's the lie. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so that's what we've got to start digging deeper and talking about. And I think we do a lot of coddling because we just say January 6th. And so, Liz Cheney, you can respect her for her position on saying the big lie in terms of the election. But I mean, before January 6th, Liz Cheney passed those policies. So she's no saint. And that's
she voted 93% of the time with
Trump. She is actually the person that they put in, Elise Stefanik, the representative from New York that they put in, is actually less conservative than Liz Cheney was. The only reason that they ousted Liz Cheney is because she was a woman who stood up against Trump. That's one of the main reasons. One time that she stood up against Trump, they put her out. And so they have this aura now that if you're going to, say you're going to stand up against us, we're going to put you out. Which goes back to the very message of the plantation mentality that you were talking about earlier, right? Trump is the plantation master, and we just going to do his will. And when you don't do his will and go along, we're going to put you out.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what we're seeing now. It's just a plantation mentality in the Republican Party. You'll see it now that as people are looking to the 2024 presidential election, everything's about Trump, right? It's like, is he going to run? Is he not going to run? And you have all these people who want to really run for president, running to Trump, trying to make sure they're in his good graces if he happens to not run. I wouldn't be shocked if he does. And so we've got to really start being truthful that the plantation mentality is showing up here, right? In this very case, Liz Cheney is no saint. I thank her for her bravery and standing up and saying, yes, it is a lie that the election was stolen. But let's talk about all the policies she passed that don't benefit people who look like us on the screen. And then lastly, the big lie of this country is that racism doesn't exist. And we see that now. And you can't solve a problem if you won't acknowledge a problem. And that's what we're continuing to see now, that even 5 months later, we saw it with our own, like you said, our own, unless all of us can't see or all of us need glasses. We saw it clear as day on national, international, even on television of the things that they've done. And they've shown us that they will use violence. They will use hateful language when they don't have their way.
And they will throw their own people under the bus. And this goes back to Brandon describing the white person in the trailer in the backwoods without a pot to piss in, voting for the Republican Party. They showed you if they're willing to throw Representative Cheney under the bus, they ain't even thinking about you in the trailer. So, and they're proving both things. They're willing to throw enough white people under the bus to manipulate those white people to vote against black and brown people. And those people don't realize you're not voting, you're not hurting black and brown people. Well, you are, but you're hurting yourself too. And they just prove we're willing to throw our own people under the bus to maintain this myth of this country,
and
this
maintain
racist
power.
country.
And maintain power. Yeah. And the one thing that
to maintain the systems.
Right. And to your point about where they were talking about, what you were talking about, throwing enough white people under the bus to make them believe that they're going against black and brown people. It's almost like, my grandmother would always say, the grave you dig, the hole you dig for me, you better dig a double one. Because you'll fall in it first. And that's what we're seeing when you look at especially Southern, middle to low class, lower income white people. You're seeing that across especially the Southeast region, that they're thinking I'm going and I'm maintaining white power, but you're still living in the same trailer, right? You still have the same minimum wage job at the plant that you've been working since you graduated high school or whatever. And so those are the things. They're not helping you either. They just make you believe enough in your whiteness in the midst of your community in the place where you are right now. And that is dangerous too, because even though, we know that white power is not to just help black and brown people, we know that they're not even helping their own. And that's dangerous too.
Very dangerous. Very dangerous. Brandon, I know you got to go. So say some final words before you sign off. And then I want to add something what Jamarr just said, if I can remember after Brandon speaks. But go ahead, Brandon.
It's not going to be long. I just want to make sure that folks who watch us continue to push us and even challenge us. I love seeing what's happening in the comment section right now. And I hope that when Marilyn gives us the book of the month, like she does, that folks will follow suit, because I've been buying these books and reading them, and they have all been amazing. So, Mediocre is my next one that I'm about to start, and I'll report back next month, Marilyn, on the third Sunday. But we all have to seek knowledge. We have to seek knowledge. We have to seek it like our lives depend on it, because in many cases, our livelihood does. There's so much happening so fast right now at every level that if you don't pay attention, you'll miss it. And by the time you realize it's happening, it's too late. We cannot wait for someone else to tell us that the rocket is coming or that this opportunity is there. We have to always seek the opportunities for ourselves and trust but verify. Trust but
That's
verify.
Right. That's right. Trust but verify, Brandon. You're very correct on that. Before you leave, Brandon, May 25th is the date that we vote. All
May
right. So
25th.
Brandon's running. Go ahead and tell us why we need to vote on May 25th.
Man, I'm running for the South Carolina Democratic Party's Black Caucus to be its chairman. The election is a virtual election. You can go to my website, brandonupson.com, and register, learn more about me and my platform. But this caucus represents all Black folks in South Carolina who consider themselves Democrats. There's about 800,000 of us, y'all. And the caucus is responsible for bringing those issues and their voice to our Democratic Party to make sure our party is held accountable to us, because we make up the foundation of this party. So I'm excited about it. And I hope folks on here will register and join us on the 25th.
Very good.
Thanks, Marilyn.
Thank you, Brandon.
Good seeing y'all.
I know.
You should be getting some phone calls tomorrow. I've been making calls for you per our conversation yesterday.
Okay, I appreciate that.
No problem.
I gotta make a phone call for Jamarr too. All right, Brandon.
I love you guys.
We'll see you later.
Talk to y'all later.
Bye.
Okay, bye. Yeah, Jamarr, I got a phone call I got to return on your behalf.
Yeah.
But I got it. It's been a rough week for me. But anyway, Jamarr, I can't remember exactly what I was going to say, but it has something to do with the whiteness and what you were saying. But you also, before we go, because this show went by really fast, but we wanted to talk about COVID and the decision allowing those who are fully vaccinated to go without masks and outside. And of course, they encourage people to still wear masks in tight quarters inside with a large group of folks, et cetera, et cetera. But there's been a little pushback, and maybe that this was too early to say this, and also that, of course, we all know the people who didn't want to wear masks from the beginning or don't want to get vaccinated, they're going to basically lie and say they got vaccinated. That's why they don't wear a mask. So your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, one of the things I think, Marilyn, is very important, and I was trying to find, actually, I was pulling up while you were talking, the vaccination rate for the country while you were talking, and I believe we're still under 50%, or just shy of 50%, right? Yeah. And so I think that, there's two parts to it, right? There's, obviously continued and equitable access to the vaccine for those who choose. We know that every American may opt to not take the vaccine, but obviously, as Dr. Fauci has said many times, that, we would want a herd mentality where you get 60, 70, maybe even up to 80% of the country, because it's the same thing as the flu shot, right? That every person doesn't take the flu shot every year. And so, but folks get to make their individual decisions. But we know that with something like COVID-19, how it has really rocked our lives. I mean, how we educate our children, how we run our organizations and our businesses, how we vote, how we socialize now, because, obviously you're not going to the big parties. You're not having the in-person events that we used to. I think some people are starting to slowly get into small events and things like that. I was driving around Austin for those who don't know, I live in Austin, Texas. And I was just driving around and I had outdoor dinner with a friend. And I mean, you would see the bars just crowded, no masks, no social distancing, and things of that nature. I understand that, we want to get back to life, right? And we want to do that in a safe way as possible. So one of the things I think that's important that we still have to look at is making sure that we're looking at what are the testing rates? How many positive tests are we still receiving? How many folks are still being hospitalized with COVID? But also what those numbers look like as it relates to the vaccine, because the vaccine doesn't protect you from COVID. It alleviates the symptoms you may experience if you happen to contract COVID. And so it's not like we just end all, be all, and we're superheroes. And so those are just some things that I've been thinking and things that, I've been having conversations. It's not a matter of my personal opinion. I will just share with everyone, I did receive the vaccine. I know several family members and friends and colleagues who received it, and many of them were encouraged. But I just think that these are all things that we just need to consider going forward. And so I know that, President Biden has committed to making sure that the country can return to some sense of normalcy. But I do also think that we want to make sure we do it in a smart and sensible way. And part of public health means that the public has to make some personal decisions that impact their lives. So, for example, when I go out to the grocery store and other things, I still wear masks, just not just my safety, but other people's safety too. Because everybody either hasn't gotten a chance to get the vaccine. There are a lot of people right now that still have the first shot and haven't gotten the second shot, so they're not fully vaccinated. Right. And so those people still need to be protected in the midst of us returning to normalcy. And so there's just multiple factors. I know I threw out about 10 of them probably that, we have to, consider. And so I would just say, I encourage people to wear masks, social distance where you can, but also be mindful about vaccinations. Because like you said, people can lie about it and say, I got vaccinated and they didn't. And people can be carrying it and they don't know because everyone doesn't experience symptoms. So I just think there's just a lot of different things. And I know folks I've been seeing on social media, like I'm still wearing my mask. That's a personal decision. But I think that it may be just a little too early. I would have wanted to wait until maybe after the Memorial and the 4th of July holidays. Because you announce something like that before Memorial Day, everybody's going to go out of the house. So those kind of things are concerned.
People breathing on
you. Those kind of things concern me. I was like, y'all can wait till after like 4th of July to tell us that.
But, I'll say this. So I voted for Joe Biden, and I tend right now, actually, as the Republican Party stands right now, I don't see myself voting for it anytime soon. So I want to put that out here to get to this point. With that being said, this is why we have to have discernment, as Brandon mentioned, and as you've mentioned, have knowledge. Because it doesn't matter which party, you still have to understand that at this point in our history, both parties uphold the systems that hurt Black and brown people. They do. But there happens to be one party that we have more influence in. They're forced to listen to us and make change. All right. So we have this particular subject with them. I agree with you, Jamarr, that I think they could have waited. But we also have to understand that the Democrats are just as concerned about this economy and upholding certain systems. So this is just an example of that. And this will be next month's third Sunday Politics Talk, to how deep this is, but it also speaks to why we need knowledge, why we need discernment, why we need intellect and critical thinking skills to decide what is the best for me. So for me, I went and got vaccinated. I'll say right now, 93% of what Joe Biden is doing, I agree with. Okay. The American Recovery Plan, the Jobs Plan, and all of that. But that leaves 7% where I'm like, okay, I have knowledge, or I have the ability to go get knowledge to make the best decision for me. And the decision I have made is, in general, outside, I'm not wearing a mask anymore, but I sure got it in my hand. So when I walk into a building, I put it on immediately, out of a restaurant, grocery store, whatever, because I do think it's a little bit too soon. But I also understand the bigger picture of it is they have economic pressures on them also. And so it speaks to us as voters, as engaged citizens, why it's so important to have knowledge, why it's so important that we pay attention to so many different topics. And I know it could seem overwhelming, that this is why you build a team. I know Jamarr has more knowledge about certain things that I don't have. Like when he served with Planned Parenthood, he's much more informed than I am regarding Planned Parenthood and the services they provide. So if I need that information, I know I can go to Jamarr. I have more information regarding economics and business, small businesses in particular, because I started Delegate Chamber of Commerce, and our advocacy is also the environment. People come to me as a resource on that. We're a team, folks. You can't do this alone. So get your knowledge, but share your knowledge with the team, bounce ideas, thoughts off of each other. That's why barbershops are so important and beauty salons. Use that knowledge to grow and become engaged. And I wanted to use what's going on with COVID and this new mask mandate that if you're fully vaccinated, you can go without your mask outside, but pay attention to what they're really saying. There are limits. Even if you're fully vaccinated, there are limits, and I do think they pulled the trigger a little bit too soon. I'm with you, Jamarr, that they could have waited till after July 4th. Because let's be honest.
The thing I want to add, you talk about the economic interests, but I want to, the political part of me wanted to go to the political interests too. I mean, you have the other side, their midterm elections. We hold narrow majorities in the House and the Senate. Their governorships up, their state legislative seats up. And so I think there is a play too that we're not talking about that looks toward the midterm elections because of, how people may be, feeling. And so we know that the other side is stirring up their voters and they're using a lot of this, bad public health policy to stir them up. And so sometimes you have to be careful because people get caught up in it. Because there's a mental place right now where I believe that most of the country is, I'm ready to get out the house. And sometimes it's very easy to just get caught up in it, right? I'm ready to go, drink with my friends, have a glass of wine. I'm ready to go out and have dinner. I'm ready to travel again, whatever, the case might be. And a lot of this political and mental, kind of behavior, a lot of this stuff plays in voting. And how people vote. And so there's also political interest and even ramifications they may feel the longer that they wait. So you have to balance, right, the political interest, the public health interest, but also the economic interest. And you got to manage all three together and do your best to strike the perfect balance. Now, I don't know if they did it this time, but I think, those are things that, to consider. And so what I will say is, we may not always agree with our government leaders in every decision, right? And to your point, that's why we have to have our own individual knowledge, because even when the system makes a decision that we agree with or maybe partially disagree with, etc., that we can still have the resources and the tools we need to make our own decisions and do what's best for our family. Now, for me, I haven't done a lot of traveling or anything like that. But I just think that that's my call, that's my decision. In terms of doing some of those things. And so I would just encourage your viewers and listeners, right, to do the same thing and what that looks like. And so I try to still do outdoor dining, that the weather's gotten a little better. But if I do go inside, I still wear my mask too.
And I got my little personal spray disinfectant. Yes, I do spray
hand
around
sanitizer.
Me. I do. I mean, it's, but I just wanted to make sure that, the organizations that we work for are nonpartisan, and I deliberately made it nonpartisan. But on a personal level, I'll tell anybody right now, I vote Democrat, but I vote Democrat with a discerning eye. I do not vote. Sometimes I write in votes because every Democrat is not for us.
Yeah,
that's just true. I have to be truthful with myself. And I don't vote Democrat or Republican if I don't feel these candidates are not for the interests of the community and when I say the community, not only the Black and brown community, but the community. But I start at the Black and brown community because that's who I am, Black and brown.
That's what you said.
Also,
that's
your
identity
as a whole. And but with that being said, I think it is. We need to believe in the science. That's one thing I do agree with the Biden administration on, that they have really been emphasizing the science, which it should have been from the beginning. And I think we can trust them. But even with trust, we need to use discernment, not only with COVID, but on every topic, because I don't fully agree. 95% of the time I say I will, but I also know that we're human and the systems still are made to benefit, white supremacy. And we have to be very much aware of that and not naive about it, And I think, as you say, Brandon has also said, trust but verify.
Yes. And the verification process is the most important part.
That's right. That's right. So we are at the end. We're wrapping up. We're doing good. We are an hour exactly, Jamarr, and I know I'll be seeing you and encourage everybody to read the next book, Mediocre. And
Okay. Yeah, we'll talk about it. Yes, we'll talk about it next time. I need to go buy it.
He's not going out and buy the books. We'll talk about that next time. But any last words, Jamarr, before we break up the show?
Well, one of the things not really. One of the things I think we just need to be mindful of. I know in South Carolina, Texas, legislative sessions are ending. So what we're going to be seeing over the next few months, especially back to our conversation earlier in the show about policy and policy being our love language or not being our love language in some of these states, is, one of the things that's going to be important. So make sure that you're keeping an eye out because in a lot of states, after June 1st, July 1st, a lot of new legislation is going to get implemented. And that looks different. I know you have viewers from various states. And that's, going to look, very different, if it's voting rights, if it's business regulation, in some states, it's healthcare, whatever it might be. I think that in the next few months, we need to be paying attention to what comes out of these legislative sessions, because those may impact how our communities may change before the next election. So that's the last piece that I'll share. I mean, I always have fun with these. I know I missed last month for some personal things, but I make sure I hop on and do that, and I hope that I can be a resource to people. You can just reach out to me, Jamarr Brown, I'm on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Feel free to DM me. I'm happy to have a conversation, happy to direct resources, answer questions that folks might have. Because I know it is a real thing of I want to make a change and make a difference in my community. I don't know how to, and I don't want to do it by myself, nor should you have to. And so I'm happy to, continue doing this every month as a resource, but being a resource in other ways. I'll wrap up by saying this at Repower. My title just changed. That I serve as Director of Civic Engagement now. And so we're doing a lot of work around supporting legislative advocacy, voter mobilization, and different things of that nature. So folks, please go visit our website. I think you had it up earlier, repower.org, to make sure that you're looking at, we do trainings all year. Right now, we're doing a digital organizing training. Next month, actually, in June, we're starting a national grassroots organizing training where we're literally going to train hundreds of grassroots organizers virtually right now. We're going to train them there. In July, we're going to be rolling out campaign academies. So we can teach you how to fundraise for campaigns. We can teach you about messaging. We can teach you about voter contact and those different things. This fall, we're going to have a campaign managers training. So those of you who want to go work on campaign, maybe this is a thing you found you want to do. We're going to have those kind of trainings. And so that's exciting for us to be navigating this kind of space. And so we hope that folks will go online, look at those menu of trainings, and go and attend, right? Because knowledge isn't just going to get a degree. Knowledge is maybe saying I need to get more versed on an issue or in a particular skill area. And we want to make sure we're offering those across the progressive ecosystem. And so those are just some of the things that we have going on. And you can see it online under trainings on our website. So go sign up. I think the grassroots organizing training is going to be really, really, really good. And the applications are open, I believe, until the end of the month. So you still have time to register.
I'll have to do that later. I know that you guys are doing that. I've been through that training, folks, under a different name of the organization, but it is very good training. It is well worth it. So I encourage everybody, go to repower.org and learn about their training. Any more education that you can get, knowledge you can get, take it and run with it, folks. This is how we're going to change the systems and the institutions that were not built to benefit us. Jamarr, I think what you said is a wonderful way to end the show. And I just want to thank everybody for joining us today, and especially Jamarr and Brandon, because they're always on the move. And we we come in, we get ready, we do our show, and then we're out again. And I think
doing stuff. Yeah,
we're doing stuff. But they are actually slowed down a little bit. I'm going to go get some ice cream. And I am.
That sounds like fun. That sounds like fun.
Yeah, Jamarr went, because it's an event.
Yeah, but what's so crazy? What I have learned that is so crazy now because we all are on the move and serving different capacities in our communities. Just sitting down and having some ice cream, like I literally have to put self-care on my calendar. Like I went and got a massage last week, and and literally put it on a calendar. Like, I mean, we have to
Good
make
for
sure we
you.
take care of ourselves in
Yeah.
this work.
Yeah.
So, when we
I
say
took
ice
days off.
cream, you know,
Yeah.
we say
I
ice
took
cream and a
days off
massage.
beginning this week.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I
And
just
I've been seeing you waving. I've been seeing you, Marilyn, over there waving your nails. So I went. And you must have had another event.
Yes. Woo! And after a year, woo, it feels so good. I would lift my feet and show my toes, but yeah, that would not be cool. But just know that the fingers match the toes.
But yeah, so that's what I'm saying, y'all. I mean, we love the work we do. We know that we're in it for the long haul. Marilyn, you've been doing it longer than us, and we're just some new kids coming on the block. But we're trying to, make it work. So when she says it's an event, y'all, it really is.
Yeah, it really is. Thank you, Jamarr. Appreciate it. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll see you soon. All right.
Okay, take care, everybody.
Talk to you later. Bye, everybody. And I just wanted to let everybody know that next week on Wednesday, it's going to be Locke's Images. It's a gallery show that's coming up in Georgetown, South Carolina, and we want everybody to know. So just join us next week on Wednesday to meet the artist. Thank you, and look forward to seeing everybody. Good night.